Audio Jungle.
All right, you guys set up and ready?
Audio Jungle.
3, 2, 1, go!
Audio Jungle.
Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to my studio, by the way. Well, unfortunately, thank you. For me, it's always really awkward to talk to camera. And just to give you a little info about the setup, here I have the Cinti, which I will use for sketching and guiding you through the stuff I'm going to present today. And here's my camera, it's the iPhone. And there's another screen that I'm using as a reference screen. So if I will look kind of disoriented and kind of a chaotic, it's not the feeling, it's the reality. I'm really disoriented right now. And also it's really awkward to talk to a camera. So I wish I would wish I could see you, and I wish I could have a beer with you guys. So that's much better to kind of start a conversation about. So where do we start? Oh, thank you for the introduction. That was really embarrassing. It's just you painted in me so well, so I don't deserve that. So yeah, maybe I should start about what actually brought me to this point, if that is a good idea. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here. because I do have a whiteboard. How to do that? The screen. Now we have the screen. You should see my screen now. And I'm gonna bring on the ArtStation. So for all of you, it's probably quite easy for you to find my profile on the ArtStation. So I don't want to stay there for too long, but just for a short moment to give you a bit of the background. I've started my career as a car designer. I worked in a Skoda, which is a Volkswagen daughter company based in Czech Republic, producing a few cars a year, about 1 million. And at that time, we were just starting. So our task was to come up with a car that would be, fulfilling the worldwide requirements, the global requirements for worldwide for a global product. And I started my career as a component designer. So, doing really cool stuff like wheel covers, door handles, spoilers, and things like that. So very challenging. But it was a great lesson for me because the Skoda was acting almost like a startup in those 90s. And after a while, I decided that I want to pursue another career, which is more conceptual, giving me more artistic or creative freedom. So I became to kind of pursue the career of a concept designer. And that took me to projects much later on, such as Terminator, Dark Fate, which is the last thing I was working on. So if you want to take a look. So that's the baby, how it looks in the movie. That's the stuff I've designed. I was working directly with Tim Miller, who happened to be a fantastic director of this movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, I think give it a chance. Although the money it was supposed to make, it didn't. But I think it's still a great movie, and Tim Miller as a person is a fantastic guy, and it was a pleasure to work with him. So I don't want to really spend too much time on showing off of the stuff I've done. I want to share with you more the motivations for what is happening right now. I'm pretty sure that most of you had that experience as well. If you draw something, if you sketch something, if you create something, a lot of people give you this kind of a funny comment, such as, if I would have your talent, if I would have your fantasy, or that must be a God's gift, what you're doing. And I thought this is so inappropriate because it took me almost 20 years of practicing and trying hard and failing to get to the point when I could work on the Terminator, such as an example. And I think I didn't have an answer for those kind of stupid comments that it's all about the talent. So about 10 years ago, I started to dig deeper. What's behind the ideation? What's behind the creative process in general? And that took me to a different crossroad, and I suddenly became an aspiring scientist, trying to dig into the neuroscience, cognitive science, understand better the processes related to find something that wasn't here before. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. Megan, was that kind of a good intro for that? Because I'm still I'm not warmed up yet. Okay. Cool. So how many are we now? That's cool. That's a good start. So I think we are ready for some science, right? Okay, cool. So, all right. So I put on the screen a couple of the definitions what the creativity is. And I want to start with a claim that I was trying to stay away from the word creativity for the last 5 years, because being an expression of creativity, the creativity as an expression, the word creativity was so abused over the last 10, 15 years. And I felt almost it became an insult to call someone creative, because there's a lot of misunderstanding in what creativity is. And also it became almost a marketing, blah, blah expression. So I was looking more for how the ideas are born, and I was using the word ideation as a process, which is an interesting expression as well. If you happen to dig into that, you may find out that the ideation has kind of easy to understand meaning in English, but it is hard to translate it to a number of the other languages. For example, most of the Slavic languages, they don't have their own version of the ideation. Same German, same French. There are only analogies of the English expression of the ideation. And that was kind of disturbing, because for me, ideation is kind of obvious. It's the process where ideas are born, when we form the ideas. But after some time, I've decided to kind of get back to what creativity is, because the ideation is part of creativity. So let's take a look on what the creativity is. And here are a few quotes. Wikipedia, one of them is Webster. I don't know where the other one I got from. And I basically kind of agree with all of them, but at the same time, I'm not really happy with them at all. Let me just do this. So what's going on here? The use of imagination or original ideas to create something, inventiveness. That may work. Creativity is a phenomenon whereby something new and somehow valuable is formed. Creativity is about producing a new idea which has a value to someone. Well, I'm not sure about producing a new idea, but I'm going to explain that later. So what is important here? Let me just grab. You should see my screen, what I'm doing here. So it is about producing something that has a value. It's a phenomenon, and it creates something new. And again, we have the valuable here. So what is happening here? So probably when we look at the creativity as a process, it is obvious it should have a start and the end. So what's in the start? It might be an intention. I wanna, design a spaceship, or it might be a problem. How do we solve a, personal transportation in the future? So let's write it down. So it's gonna be intention or problem. So that's how we start. And then we go. We do something in between. And then at the end, we have something, let's say a product, solution. Interestingly, creativity is quite frequently only linked to art. And I quite like to use that one of the goals of the creative process is creation of the artifact. An artifact can be anything. Could be a musical piece, can be a new dance, can be a visual art piece, could be a new animation, could be a new car, a concept of a car. All of that could be an artifact. And it's quite important to understand that that's the goal of the creative process, to create an innovative, a new, and valuable product. So what is happening in between? Obviously, if I'll go from the end, we need to develop that product, that solution, that artifact. We need to execute on it, and I call it production. We can call it also the development. Or the execution. And it's obvious that the result of a production is a product. The result of a development process is a solution. The execution or the result of painting, result of sculpting could be an artifact. That is quite obvious. And that's also quite important to understand. And what is happening here? Here's my favorite part. It's called ideation. And ideation is really important here. But what is even more important is to understand what's the output of the ideation. It's not the artifact. It's not the solution. It's the idea. So please remember that, because the idea is somewhere in the middle of the whole creative process. It's not about having that beautiful sketch, beautiful artwork. It's all about having idea at this point, at this level. Does it make sense? Okay, cool. Just feel free to stop me, give me some questions, because right now I'm getting in a kind of a teacher's teacher's mood, mindset.
You're in teacher mode.
And, using
it.
a digital whiteboard here. Okay, so what else we have here? I love those. I'm pretty sure you dig them in the internet as well. Mm-hmm. There are some other alternative descriptions of what the creative process is. And here is something really interesting happening. So let me just go here, add one more layer, and this is, I'm garbage. This is garbage.
Like,
this is kind of crazy.
That's a very important step of the creative process, is the garbage phase.
Absolutely. Please just keep it in mind, because it is really important. And if we go back to that previous slide, which was this one, that we are still in the middle of the whole process. The output is idea. These are perfectly valid statements. The first one is probably the more important one than the second one. The first one is, okay, but I'm perceiving, I know that this is not that good. I'm aware of it. I'm conscious. I'm aware is better. The other one is that what happened that I did produce such a unacceptable thing. Well, that's a self-critique. That's the moment when we realize that we need to change something in the process. But these two steps are extremely important. And we need to learn that we need to embrace them. And we need to encourage ourselves to spend some time in this phase of a creative process. Let me just go on. And this is one beautiful diagram of a creative process. I don't know where did I take it from, so I do apologize for not referring to the original artist, author, or designer who created this beautiful graph. Please, if you are in the audience, send me an email. I'll be happy to give you a big thank you for this graph. So what is important here? It suggests that we are going in circles. So even though we think that we have found a solution, it doesn't mean that we will stop there. We can revisit one topic again and again, and we will probably surprise ourselves that we will be able to find another meaning, another solution. So this is somehow an introduction to what I had for you. So that's the introduction. Shall we go on?
Yeah, keep going. That's great.
Okay, so ideation. I'm kind of not happy that we cannot talk, that I can't make it more interactive, because that's my favorite moment when I try to engage you guys and kind of play the game. How do you ideate? Because usually the answer I will get most frequently is I just doodle. I scribble on the paper, on a napkin, I sketch. We all do that. And it doesn't really matter if you are artists or scientists or doctors or philosophers or bricklayers, because we all, at one moment when we need to find out the solution, we kind of almost unintentionally or unconsciously reach for a piece of paper and doodle something, because that helps us to think. And I'll get back to Jesus, get back to it quite quickly in a minute. But if you look into sketching, again, it seems to be kind of a process that is impossible to divide into its components, to kind of break it down to simple steps, because it is very kind of analog in a way. However, if we do some observations, we find out interesting things. And I'm glad that when I did that, I surprised myself, but then I found that there were other people, other scientists, closely observing what is happening when we sketch, when we ideate. And that's an important thing. When we talk about the sketch, we again tend to think that the sketch is just an artistic process, artistic discipline. It's something that artists do to kind of represent the reality, sketching a still life or portrait. That's the artistic activity. No, it's not true. It's just one of the cases, one of the examples of what sketch is. The other sketch is the ideation. When we use paper or the medium, it could be a digital medium today, as an extension of our brain, of our mind, and we use it to kind of experiment and externalize our thinking process. And again, this is not my expression. This is something that Barbara Tversky already penned down about 40 or 50 years ago. I'll come back to her later. But again, what's going on when we sketch? So we start on a paper. We set up the perspective, if you know what the perspective is. We suggest some forms, then we look at those forms and change them, refine them. But again, do you see what I'm doing? We do gestures. And it was an interesting thing. Barbara Tversky in the 80s, if I remember well, she videotaped a group of architects performing a simple task. I think they had to design a kind of a house for young couple. I don't remember that. There was also another scientist, psychologist, Vinod Goel, doing the similar thing. And it was an interesting moment that has repeated in all of the cases, in almost all of the cases. All those architects, all those designers, at one point, they stopped sketching and they started to act, the size of the house, how the layers, how the floors will be layered and so on. They started to act like as if they would be that house. And at the same time, they started to talk about it. They started to verbalize their flow of the thoughts. And that was quite interesting. And we didn't have an answer for that. We thought at that time, and it was kind of a major opinion, that it was just part of the process that we just, when we don't know how to continue on a paper, we start to use words and gestures. It's so funny, if there are some animators here in the group, we all probably do that. We still do that. I found myself when I was working on some character designs, I always look closer to the camera and try to make faces as if I would be, that hunter or soldier or something like that. So we are acting. And again, this is super, super important here. Remember that. So that's some observation. That's, in a way, an example of the scientific approach. If you want to understand the ideation, we need to start observing it in order to be able to describe it. So I'm happy to say that it wasn't just me who paid attention to visual ideation. I started with Barbara Tversky. So if you're interested in that, prepare a couple of the books here for you. So this is Barbara Tversky's Mind in Motion. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic book. Go Google. She's got some interesting YouTube presentations and talks. Even some of her lectures are available. She's a fantastic woman, super smart. And she penned down a couple of the kind of parameters or expressions related or linked with the sketching as the visual spatial activity. One of them is action gestures. And we use visual explanations. The representation of concepts are happening in space. So remember those things because we will come to them again later on today. also Vinod Goel, who started his career as an architect, he kind of got into the same set of the expressions as well, the same set of terms. And then my favorite, Bill Buxton, is probably king of the user experience design, a superhero, currently working for Microsoft, and I'm highly recommending this book, Sketching User Experiences, where he also came to the same conclusion. Bill is a scientist, but his profession is a user experience. He's a designer. So it's interesting to reach the same level of the understanding of the creative process, of the ideation process, as those from the field of cognitive psychology. And it was striking because for me, there was a proof of a concept that we are going the right direction. And then finally, there was a brilliant Ronald A. Finke, a professor of psychology at Texas State University, author of Creative Cognition, Theory, Research, and Applications, who penned down something called Gen-Explore model, generate and explore. And this is something I want to discuss later on. So what do I have here? Yeah, I may come up to that later. How is the pace? Is everyone catching up? I mean, no comments yet?
No questions yet. I think we're doing good. This is all super interesting, and I feel like everyone's just in like absorption mode.
Cool. Okay, so we may have something more. So this is the Gen-Explore model. It's based on the assumption that we have an ability to generate the images when we sketch, when we create, when we externalize our thinking process using a medium. And then once we generate those images, we explore them again. And I think we kind of understand quite well how we generate the images. We just sketch, right? But how do we explore them? What's the machine behind it? What's the mechanism? What are the processes that allow us to explore our images and come up with something new? And for that case, I love this slide. Let me start with this. Yeah, this is something we probably could see up there. I got some roof windows, and there are beautiful clouds today. The thing is that there are clouds, there are some trees, but we all see something in those clouds. Me, I'm a dog person, so I see a couple of dogs playing with each other. There are other people like my cousin, she's so keen on horses, so she sees horses everywhere. But there are people with bigger fantasy than I have or we have, and they see a bunch of other things. There was already also a contest on the internet for concept artists to come up with the interpretation of those shapes. So here we go. There are no dogs, yet we see them. And that's interesting, isn't it? I find it really fascinating. And then we got this famous thing, Rorschach. It's kind of funny because I had a brief look earlier, about 5, maybe 10 years ago, how these ink blots were used and what was the outcome. And in fact, whatever you said, it didn't really matter. What did you see, if it was a butterfly or a fly or spider? There was always some kind of a sexual disease or something like that. I don't know. No, it's like a sexually psychological malfunction. What? So no, it's also another example how we can see shapes and existing things in blobs and forms that they were not intentionally there. There are no forms, but we see them. And one last example. This is the famous face on Mars. It's an interesting thing because, of course, there's no face, there's no pyramid, there's no face. It's just a play of light and shadows. And it turns out that our brain is really hardwired, that the first thing we tend to recognize in ambiguous, unclear images is the human face. And there's a neuroscientific evidence for that. So I don't want to go in that direction, but it's a fantastic example of how our brain works. And just to close this chapter, if you're interested in these kind of things, go look into model and model completion or Gestalt psychology or Gestalt therapy. That's the whole psychology field that describes and studies those phenomena of how we perceive the images, the visual stimuli. And that's quite interesting because they have described a lot of interesting and cool cases how our brain tricks us and how our eyes are insufficient and probably weak and poor. And when I got into that, it was a kind of a striking moment, and I said, hey, what if our poor sensory system is the root of our creativity? And that might be a bold statement. It's a hypothesis I'm working on, and it's partially one of the things I'm trying to investigate with my doctoral studies. So that took me from psychology and observation into something that is possible to quantify a bit better, and it is, hallelujah, neuroscience. So let's take what neuroscience tells us. But before we do that completely, we need to understand what happens at the level of the eyes, because our eyes are far from being perfect. First thing, the cone that allows us to see sharply is only about 20 degrees wide. Everything else has basically a low resolution, yet we don't see anything blurred. Then we have the blind spot. That's where the optical nerve connects to the eye. And that's the spot which makes us blind in that point, yet we are not aware of it. Then we are blinking with our eyes. We do have those microsaccades, which is a set of the micro movements happening unintentionally many times in a second. Then there's a conduction, the nerve velocity, how quick is the information traveling through the optic nerve. And it turns out that it's quite slow. It's so slow that if we experience a simultaneous effect, like clapping the hands, our brain registers the sound of the clapping earlier than the visual stimuli. And that is kind of striking, yet we don't perceive those two things as two separate events. So with all of that, there must be some kind of a huge machinery behind our visual perception that reduces all of that chaos coming from our insufficient sensory system. There's one other thing, it's my favorite topic, that we don't really see 3D. The 3D is a construct of our brain. And then there was a link to it that tells that we need two eyes to see three-dimensionally. Again, it's not true. If you cover one of your eyes, you'll still perceive the space because it's the construct of your brain. So what is happening in brain? That's interesting because it turns out that our visual perception is not the same thing as seeing. Because our perception is built from two components. One of them is the information coming from my eyes, that's the seeing. And then the rest is a mental construction of our brain. In certain cases, the visual information, the visual perception is a combination of 15% of the external stimuli, the light that enters our eyes and builds the image, and about 80, 85, sometimes even more, is a brain construct. And from that was easy to hypothesize that this is the starting point of our creativity. We see so poor that we need our capacity of our brain to be able to construct. And once we can construct, we can, teach the brain to construct things in a different way, which is, I would say, really fascinating. If you want to learn more about these kind of things, again, this is fantastic guy. His name is David Eagleman. He wrote a number of the books, The Brain, The Incognito, and so on. He's got a couple of I think there's even a Brain as a TV series at BBC in UK. A number of the TED Talks. One of them is about sensory replacement, working with a group of blind people wearing the sonars and teaching them to kind of see using technology, which make their visual cortex active again. Fascinating stuff, really recommending to watch these things. But what is important here is this claim. Our brains are always crushing ambiguity into choices. And that's important because the choices are sometimes subconscious, but in most of the cases are conscious. We want to make a choice. We think through what will be the outcome of that choice. And if we can control our choices, and probably everyone will agree that by education, by our culture, by the experiences, we learn ourselves that our choices are better and better. So if we can teach our brain to make better choices, maybe we can teach our brain to be creative, more, better, and so on, because it's all about the choices. Still clear? Still fun? Okay, cool. So let me go to another. Oh, I like this part. So yeah, it's all, let's blame this guy. So this is, I was watching a lecture, I forgot, it was a neuroscientist talking about the creativity, and one of the things he was talking about, that we will be more creative, we can be more creative if we switch off our frontal cortex, because that's the part of the brain that makes us adults, and that, and also which turns off when we are dreaming in the night. And that's kind of interesting, because it turns out we can apply that knowledge on something conscious and mindful again. I'm gonna turn that off for a second, and let me start here. So let me talk about the ideation process again. And in the beginning, we made that definition that in the end, we are looking for a new idea on one side, but at the same time on something that has a value. So it's the ultimate goal. It's not just, not producing ideas for the sake of producing ideas. It's about, there's a goal. It should be valuable. So let's see how this kind of process works. And I need to take a look here because I forgot the name of the guy. It's Stefan Mamo, who presented fantastic graph. He called it a map of creativity or shape of creativity. And it's a simple thing, and I really like that. So I'm gonna present it to you as well. But the full credit goes to him. So we have a graph. Here's the time, and here is the Q. And the Q stands for quality, but also can be for quantity. So what's going on here? I'll give you a simple task. Let's say, come up with a solution for a personal transportation 20 years from now. You got 2 minutes to come up with some ideas. So time is ticking, click, clock, click, clock. The first thing is, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. And we got in panic. But then, so we kind of start somewhere here, just something. But then suddenly we start to come up with some ideas. And the first come the ideas, kind of obvious solutions. We come up with something we have already seen, something that exists, or the solution we heard about. So what is happening here? Memory. And that's a funny thing because we cannot create anything that we don't know yet, that we haven't seen yet, because everything we create is already there. We just give it a new meaning, and that's kind of funny. So once we dig through our memories and experiences, we kind of come up with a couple of the solutions, a couple of the ideas for a start. And those ideas are always out of high quality, and there is usually plenty of them. Just miss the A here. So there are plenty of them, and they're kind of relevant to our task, to our goal. But then after some time, we just stop, we don't have any more ideas because our memory, our collection of the experience is not, endless. It's limited. So after a while, we stop again and again. Kind of the frustration starts. And in that case, if we would be able to, what have I done? Oh, sorry. If we could, turn off the frontal lobe, we would be able to experience something really fantastic. Yeah, we do that. If you work with a group, it was quite frequent that someone, through this initial brainstorming session, after those useful memory-based proposals, they come up with something really stupid. It's like, are we gonna need a car for personal transportation in 20 years? Maybe we'll all ride bicycles. And come on, suddenly everyone accepted the game and they started to push a lot of funny, stupid ideas. This is really cool because by entering the area of stupidity, we could do another peak. And that another peak was a combination of those two. And here the innovation happens. That's when we come up with the new, fresh ideas. I do have a graph that is slightly better. Not that one, it's that one. Slightly better described. So when we start, we follow a routine, we follow known things, we follow our memories, the existing things, our experiences. And of course, as we listed it this way, it suggests a certain way, how can we kind of nurture the ability to contribute in that first phase, to come up with something relevant quickly. We can work on building our visual memories. We can work on building our experiences. And that's quite simple. Just travel, watch films, procrastinate on the internet. What's more important, read. Because by reading, you assign categories and abstract meanings to things that they were only visual stimuli a few minutes ago. By combining those two things, you are creating the visual libraries and the set of the experiences. They will have use in the third last phase. Then how kind of enter the area of stupid? How do we battle it? So we cannot turn off the frontal cortex consciously. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know how. But the thing is, there's also a way how to come up with stupid yet valuable input. Embrace the ambiguity. Just accept that it's time to be stupid. It's time to play, because it's not our goal to produce the artwork. Our goal is to produce the idea. Idea is what counts, what matters. So embrace the ambiguity, and then you'll be able to combine your experiences with that playful randomness. And now if you would think about what we mentioned earlier about those architects and designers, how did they start to act when they were presenting the flow of their thoughts? We have a hint what to do at the phase three. Just interact with what you have. Just interact with it. And that's really important. That's a quote by Barbara Tversky. By rearranging the word, we are changing the meaning of the word. And by doing those things, we can give them the new meaning. We can assign the new function. When we design spaceships, an engine we have stolen from a jet fighter may become part of the cockpit because we give it a new meaning. But we need to go through that stage of being stupid and accept the ambiguity, uncertainty, in order to come up to that last stage. So this is somehow a mission of my today's presentation, to give you those 3 points. If you want to come up with fresh new ideas, don't worry. There's a hint. There's a help for each stage. So first start, build your visual memory. It's all about your experiences and how you use them. And the best way how to leverage your experiences is by reading, and read along. Then embrace the ambiguity. Play with the uncertainty. Accept the failure. This is really important. And then if you remember that first stage, this is shit. I am shit. Accept it. That's the right time to be. And enjoy that, because if you enjoy that, it will give you more material to work with at the stage 3. And it's all about the interaction, about combining, cutting, editing, flipping sides, changing the order, changing the rhythm. So by interaction, you are exploring the whole field of possibilities, and you may come up with a new set of ideas. So with that said, I need to sip a bit of the water, and I'm open to the next part of our talks. Okay, any feedback so far?
No, someone did bring up, it was more of just a comment, and I think this was during when you were speaking about that moment of this is garbage, which I think the garbage moments, again, kind of falls in with this, like, this is a stupid idea, is a really important piece of this whole creative process. But someone had mentioned imposter syndrome, which I feel like is something that creatives of all disciplines face now, especially with the internet and social media. And we have the ability to see so much great work from around the world. But then, to your point, you had said keep reading, which I think is a really important task, because when you read, your mind fills in those visual blanks that the words create. So the words are going to outline or describe a scenario or a person or a thing or whatever. So I think it's a really interesting process, I think, to read and allow your mind to create what those visuals would look like, especially now since we're in a world that is so visually based, and it can be a bit disheartening. But on the other side of that too, I think remember that as designers and as creatives, everybody makes stupid things at some point, right? Like not every sketch you go and create, not every illustration, not every design, whatever you're making starts off and is like, I just did this little sketch and this is now exactly what it's going to be. It's very rarely that's the process. So just give yourself the personal freedom to draw dumb stuff.
Absolutely. By the way, the imposter syndrome, it's a good motor. Of course, at the moment when it starts to consume you, then it's wrong. But if your everyday starts with you enter the office, the studio where you work, when you are supposed to be creative the whole day, and your first thought is, "What the fuck I'm doing here?" That might be a right moment.
Yeah.
Because that might be a good motor.
We did actually just have a question. So on this same topic of building visual memory by reading, how can, because that might be difficult for people that are visual learners. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how people that are really more visual learners can build their visual memory through reading, or if there's any tricks to kind of work through that, if reading might be not the best option for some people?
It's a sign of a time that reading becomes more and more difficult because it really takes time. However, we still do have a quite rich vocabulary. The internet and this digital age didn't take this kind of ability or that skill away from us. So for me, I'm a person that easily get caught in the moment. I love watching the nature. I love being in the nature. But sometimes I find myself that the consumption, the observation of the nature became something unconscious that I'm not aware of. So, learning to be aware of what you're observing, that's the first step to build kind of conscious controlled visual memory. And then just help yourself with verbalizing. I know that's a kind of a little trick that I'm using just recently. It's a different thing, looking at a freshly mown lawn and then saying, this is fresh mown lawn in your mind. It's green and it's short and the smell is there. And you build a connection, and suddenly it's not that the visual stimuli anymore. There's a connection with the smell, and you actively build the bridge between neurons. There are physical connections in your brain being built in that very moment. And those connections you will leverage later on. And also, there's a one, again, I feel really bad about not quoting the right person, but there was someone mentioning that it's good to add the story to what you're looking at. If you're visiting a castle, you will probably remember the shape and the style and those stones on the walls much better if there would be a story related to it. In that wall, there was a virgin that made a crime, so they locked her.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly, you got all that story, kind of a very kind of European thing, but
we don't have too many castles
the thing
over
is,
here.
And we had that earlier, so it's not just. Of course, it's watch. Oops. Verbalize. Act. So these are kind of three things I kind of like to do. And it was funny, a long time ago when I was at the university, a colleague of mine, a student, he was very keen on Star Wars. It was really contagious. That's where I got into Star Wars as well. And he always, during any presentation, he made sounds. He was talking about the forms, and he described those forms also by a gesture. And then he said that the ribs on the grill of the car would repeat themselves in that rhythm. And that is really interesting because you're kind of connecting and synchronizing a couple of the things that are happening at the same time. And we human, we love synchronicity. By the way, that was a fantastic thing. The origin of art, it's all about the synchronicity. That might be another topic for a different time.
Too good. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Please feel free to drop them in the chat. Yeah, Jess Collins, who's actually I think in Mexico City, had said reading is a trigger to build ideas, and I think that's a great. But I think to your point of what the slide you have up now, it's that watch, verbalize, act. I think oftentimes we see things we like, you see other sketches that you like or ideas that you like, and you don't write down or like put into words why you like them, which I think can be another good trick to help inform your own design practice of like, what is it about this thing that I like what is it specifically, and then that can then trigger your brain and work in that whole like mental design mode to inform future designs or concepts or ideas that you have. It's this revolving door. You had that circle graph. You just keep going around and around in that circle and kind of repeating all those steps until you land on something brilliant.
Well, I'm just turn off my screen sharing for a moment to read some of the comments here. Cool. Thank you, guys. So what else we have?
I know, what else? Goodness. I do like the point you made about acting out. So we, at the Experience Center, we do a lot of these really great creative process interviews with artists, and we speak, you have a request to sketch a spaceship. So if you feel like sketching a spaceship now, please feel free. But we do a lot of conversations, and we have a lot of conversations with artists about their creative process. And I think one of those things that we've found, especially with character designers, is that acting out is you have to feel like, okay, is this character mean? Is he a bully? And then physically, as you're sketching out these ideas, you like hulk up. And so there's a physical reaction to how characters are designed. And I think that is something that I'm sure tons of other designers in their own disciplines also include that kind of physicality to their design process. But I think it's that again, just another piece in that creative process wheel of making sure that you're thinking of everything at all different angles and taking into consideration the multiple facets.
Yeah. Yeah, spaceship is always good. Yeah, keep coming. Those come on, give me some more questions. It's awkward here.
I know, this is always the funny point of doing virtual events when you are the only one in your space, just talking to your Cintiq, which you probably do when you're not live streaming.
Yeah, by the way, as you can see, I'm very experienced, so I've already entered the phase of being stupid. I've skipped the first one when sketching spaceships.
You just jump straight, you just dive right in, go straight into that mode. It's good.
Yeah, straight to stupid.
Let's see, hold on. Oh, here we go. Someone just has a question, and I apologize. Oh, no, I guess this came up just now. What do you see on the horizon for this topic? So the topic of meta-sketching and the science of sketching, where do you see happening kind of in the future?
That's a great question. There's definitely a goal. First of all, my kind of a first goal was to kind of demystify the creative process, the ideation as a kind of magic that happens to only chosen ones. So that's the first goal, and to popularize that, we're able to nurture the ideation as a skill rather than something that happens somewhere in the clouds. So that's the next goal, and ultimately, somewhere at the end, to come up with a framework that collects all those techniques and explains them in a scientific way, why they work and how they work, and make them usable for a wider audience. Let's say for a start at the level of the universities or the education in general. And of course, there's a bit of the dream that we have fascinating technology available these days, and we already do quite a lot for helping people to simplify the process of executing the ideas. You have starting with Photoshop or Sketchbook, Brilliant Sketchbook Pro as an app that I'm using all the time here, up to all the 3D modeling, 3D sculpting, today virtual reality. It gets easier and easier to execute your ideas into tangible form, to make them presentable, to visualize them. So we have received a lot of help and aid to execute our ideas. However, I think there's a room for the same technology to help us in that ideation phase. So this is one of the things I'm trying to understand, how we can possibly help people to ideate better, maybe to reduce the stress by giving a chance to automatically help them with sketching and doodling, to take away the pain of not delivering instantly, and so on. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great. Yeah. Another question came up actually about software. Do you always use Sketchbook, and do you prefer or do you ever work on pen and paper?
Oh yeah. Okay. So there are two questions. I like Sketchbook Pro. It's super simple. There's no kind of learning curve. It's just like a pen and paper plus undo, plus layers, plus eraser. So it is fantastic for ideation. And I'm a sketcher. If you give me a second, I reach for something. So I'm a very analog person. So these are my old sketchbooks. They are all full. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, we can see those pretty decent.
Yeah. Some robots and things like. By the way, these are all kind of ideation exercises. So I don't know if you can see, there's a kind of a scribble as an underlay for this spaceship. I don't know if you can see it. It's a kind of a random line looking like a web, or just a scribble. But that was a game I used to play when I was a frequent flyer. So I hand my sketchbook to other person sitting next to me, and I let them to do a real quick scribble, and then I try to interpret it. So I have a full book of these things. And so yeah, to your questions, all that doodling, all that on a paper. So, but I hardly show them in public. So that's one of the first opportunities you could ever see them.
Sneak peek.
Sneak peek, yeah.
And then there was another question in our Zoom chat. Do you find free association provides a good resource for creative improvisation?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I sure can. Do you find free association provides a good resource for creative improvisation?
Yeah. And that's yes answer. That's the answer. So what I'm doing right now, just as if you could notice that, basically take that form, that shape up there, and apply it on my sketch lower or below that. That gives me a bit of the more variation, so I've added, let's say, a detail to it, but I've pushed it, in my eyes, to another level. Suddenly, I've combined two different ideas, so I moved from that, playing with the stupidity, to the third stage, when I can combine these things and I can interact them, I can scale them up, I can flip the sides and so on. And that's a really cool way to ideate. If it makes any sense.
It does. Yeah, there was a follow-up statement to that last question on free association, and it said, he clarified a bit and said, by free association meaning let's say you're assigned to design a doorknob, so you would look at like a book of clouds or flowers or things not related to doorknobs to help kind of be a good, just as a good
absolutely.
resource.
Yeah, okay. So this is it happens a lot in the automotive design. Just an example. If you Google out some of the latest talk by Frank Stephenson, who is a designer of McLaren, he used to be a design director at McLaren. He also designed the new generation Mini, and he was for a long time a chief designer director of Maserati, Ferrari, and the whole Fiat group. So quite an amazing person, and he loves to use kind of a starting point for his creative process, an inspiration coming from an animal world. So for his McLaren studies, he had, I think it was a cheetah or tiger or something like that. And it wasn't just a free association, because he was looking for the essence of that animal to be expressed in sort of an abstract form and to become a form or theme for the design of the car. So it wasn't a direct citation, direct quoting of that existing animal. It was rather taking the typical form or shape and transfer it into and apply it onto a design. But it's a great question, because it reminds me of some time ago, before I kind of got into more, I don't want to say more scientific, but more, let's say, controlled approach to solving these things. I was playing with the idea I used to call form bashing. You can still find some of the tutorials on the internet. And the form bashing was a simple thing that suggested you to look for the certain quality. So if you were looking for, let's say, quality described as an elegance, you would go to the internet or to a library and pick up the books or the images and musical instruments, whatever, that kind of builds the feel that feels for you as an elegant form. Doesn't have to be really controlled, just the feeling. And by the collection of these forms, you started to build up an abstract forms out of these forms. And that was a kind of an assumption that if you have that quality built into those essential building blocks, you will have a pretty good chance to transfer that quality through your design process. And if you're familiar with the process called kit bashing, then you take different parts of airplanes, cars, and dozers, and you build the robots. So that's basically the similar approach, but instead of working with a physical piece, it works with some kind of aesthetic quality that represents a certain expression. So yeah, definitely, it's a good topic, worth of investigating.
Yeah, kit bashing actually just came up in the Twitch chat as well. They were saying it's like kit bashing, but creating your own kit. And I also think, to your point of using aesthetic features or styles or traits, like using, I know a lot of automotive designers will reference cheetahs and leopards and fast cats and like fast animals and use the lines of the muscles to reference wheel wells or whatever pieces are on cars, which it's early in the morning and I don't know all of my car anatomy, but that's okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Some more questions?
Oh, no, just people sharing their Instagram. Thank you, Marlena. We'll check that out.
Spaceships. Undo is fantastic. There's one thing I love about Undo. That might be, we still have some bit more time, right? Like 10, 15 minutes. So there's a lovely story I enjoy about Undo, and it's all about the way how we perceive and how we interact with digital content. And it's funny because I've met a lot of people who say that they never use Undo. I say, why? Say, because whenever I sketch on a paper, my left hand reaches for the Control Z. Well, that happens to me all the time, but I'm in love with Undo. But that's like, what's wrong with that? And because it screws my sketching abilities, and I couldn't believe that. But obviously there was something, because it wasn't just one case. So I started to look at it, and I find out that there's a fear that the Undo will potentially build a wrong muscle memory. It will break down your hand-eye coordination, but it is totally wrong. So let's start from the start. I don't know how many of you guys did any martial arts in your life. The funny thing is, one of the most popular at the time was a karate. All over the planet, every small kid wanted to be karate guy. But if you start to practice, you'd never go to punch the biggest guy in the gym. You never hit that biggest guy in the dojo. You stand alone and you practice those punches in the air. And although it doesn't provide the right feedback, you don't get beaten instantly by doing it wrong. It helps you to understand your own body. It helps you to build the awareness of your emotion. And then once you are aware that your practice leads to perfection, then it may become unconscious. And that's an interesting example because you can replicate the same process by using Undo. So if you start to do forms like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, and then suddenly the third one, maybe the 50th one, will be the right one. You don't break your muscle memory. You build actually your muscle memory because you get that instant feedback that you finally made the right stroke. And that's interesting because in a way, Undo could be a fantastic contribution to teaching people to sketch or perform other things without fear. And just to wrap it up, it turns out to me that that fear of making a mistake is the leading argument. A lot of people feels guilty for using undo because in their eyes, in their perception, it is like, I've just made a mistake and I need the computer to repair that mistake, to take my steps back. And that's completely wrong because the computer is not repairing your mistakes, not correcting you. The computer allows you to make mistakes. And that's a completely different approach. So if you think about using an undo as the cheapest and easiest way to experiment without a fear of losing the word, there you go. By the way, fantastic ideation tool. So if you're looking for the good ideation tool, you already have it. It's called undo.
Control Z, Command Z, whatever.
Control Z, yeah.
I feel like sketching on a digital platform, for whatever it is, whatever tools you use, having the ability to undo, I would imagine would potentially help people get into and then work through the stupid phase, right? Of like, this design is junk. You just keep going at it until something feels right. Whereas on paper, your sketches feel a little bit more permanent. I mean, you can always erase, but there's always some sort of trace of that. So I wonder if sketching digitally and having that undo at your hands is a bit freeing, because you can make a line and it can be not great, or it might not look right, or it might be too angular, it might not be smooth enough, whatever, but you can instantly undo it and then move on. So
yeah,
I feel like it's a freedom tool. It doesn't work in real life though. If you try to like Control Z wherever you are out in the real world, it's an unfortunate tool that we don't have yet. If I could Control Z certain things throughout my day, that'd be great.
Yeah, that was one other thing that I probably didn't mention. So, and I think it's quite important. It's a contribution of neuroscience in understanding what's happening when we are sketching on a paper. And it turns out that it's really a spatial activity. And all those, the little gestures we do, they're linked in our brain in one region, which is responsible for space and the motion. So you cannot divide or kind of split those things from each other. So when you sketch, you really interact physically with that content on a paper. And that's why your ability to come up with the new ideas kind of multiplies, or it amplifies by using a medium such as pen and paper, because that gives you a chance to interact much better than in just your brain. And I've skipped one slide, so it was called embodied cognition. And this is one of the latest directions these days, that the way we think is deeply rooted in our bodies. Actually, the bodies we have, our physical bodies, are part of our thinking process, the thinking system. So that also explains that virtual reality these days has such a big impact on creative industries. Tools such as Gravity Sketch, if anyone have tried it, really allows you to draw and sketch in the space. So if anyone uses Gravity Sketch or any VR and sits when doing an art in VR, it's basically like shooting yourself in your feet. Stand up, move. If you use your body, your perception will work 100% better. And also your brain will be able to interact with the content you're creating way better. VR is the future.
Yeah, designing in VR with volume and being able to draw a line that has volume, I think is a really, it's super fascinating. It takes a little while to get used to. I mean, I think just the physically being in VR, having the headset on and trying to like get yourself situated to that virtual environment takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's a super interesting tool. I know specifically Gravity Sketch is being used a lot right now in automotive design. They're also shifting into footwear design and soft goods as well, but you have that like next level relationship with your sketches because now they have volume to them. You can see them in mass. You can walk around what it would feel like from side to side, which I think is a super cool extension of what people are already doing.
Yeah. So.
Too cool. All right, any more?
Meanwhile, I got back into the stage too, so being stupid again.
So when you go and you start to sketch or concept something like a spaceship, we could get into a whole other hour-long discussion of whether or not spaceships are real or not. That could be an extension of this. Where does your mind go? What sort of like visual references do you have in your head that you go to for technology that is potentially non-existent or so far, technology made in either the future or in, civilizations that have a far better grasp of technology than we do? Like, what sort of visual references do you go to when you start concepting future tech like a spaceship?
That's a very good question. It really depends on the task. If it's everyone knows Bauhaus, right? The form follows function. So the function, the request, the requirement, the briefing, what the function is or should be, is part of the analysis, the research that happens before the ideation. So if I would get a call from NASA to help them to design their future spaceship, I would need to fully respect the laws of physics, because the function is to take safely the people to the orbit and land, maybe do some flying on the orbit. That would be the definition of the function. However, if I design for a comic book, for a graphic novel, for a movie, the function is the visual appeal, as a contribution to a story. So there I'm looking for things like easy to recognize parts or components. In this case, I'm using some components. They may look like wings. And of course, we have a deep association that everything that flies got wings, right? Although they are absolutely useless in space, right? But if we add the wings, our brain instantly reads this is a flying object. So the wings are good. Wings are good. Then, of course, with the first Sputnik in the last century in the 50s, with those 4 antennas sticking in the back, we will always have an antenna in our mind when we will talk about the spaceship. And those are little things that they become a cultural thing. So we know that whenever there's an antenna, it must be a piece of technology. Although the bugs, they have their own antennas, but the antenna. So these are the things I'm kind of trying to use and apply some kind of an aesthetics that suggests a function that is purely fictional. And I think that's a job of the concept designer as well, to understand the briefing, what the function is, what the functional requirements are. And in the movie, it's obvious the pleasing aesthetics. Okay.
Yeah, that is cool. I think it's always that trick when you're concepting technology or crafts or anything that don't necessarily quote unquote exist in our world, to have some sort of reference that people have some sort of visual or at least understanding of like what these things could be. So yeah, that's super fascinating. I won't derail us into a sci-fi conversation. Although it's maybe my favorite, so sorry for everyone out there. Too cool. Any last, we've got about 10 minutes left. Any other questions? The truth is out there. It is a fact. I think somewhere in the year 2020 we realized that UFOs are real. Other things are going on, so we've glossed over it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Well, any last minute suggestions? Mike, I know you brought up a number of different authors and also speakers. I know there's a number of TEDx videos and talks that you have. Is there any other resources you could suggest to those of us in the Zoom and on Twitch that you think would or just are helpful in general for any part of that creative process?
Yeah. There are a couple of the podcasts I enjoy. There's a British one called Panpsycast, and these are two. I think they're both doctors of philosophy, not the philosophy in any discipline, but philosophy. And they do have really fascinating set of the talks with the different guests. But they also do some analysis of philosophy. Panpsychist, really good one. They just recently had David Chalmers. David Chalmers, again, a superstar of philosophy, a person who his major was computer science. Then he moved to philosophy, and he is a kind of a champion of a panpsychism as a theory that everything is in a way conscious, that it's a non-physical property of everything, even a photon or a quark. That's kind of an interesting approach. But what is more important for me, he was one of the first few philosophers who find virtual reality interesting enough to come up with theories. What is the difference between the physical experiences and the experiences we are having in virtual reality? He's got really amazing talk about the theory of simulation, so highly recommend. David Chalmers, philosopher. Who else? David Eagleman, I mentioned that, is a neuroscientist based in LA, if I remember well. A lot of podcasts, great books. Another podcast is called Mindscape. It's about the neuroscience mostly. So some of them go really, really deep in terms of technical knowledge or medical knowledge, so it might be quite challenging, but the messaging, the content is always fantastic. What else? In terms of art, I love watching Feng Zhu. Feng Zhu is a genius walking on this planet. He has his own school in Singapore, I believe, Feng Zhu, ZHU. And the school is called Feng Zhu's School of Design. He's a guy who did a lot of work for major movies and games. And he's got fantastic YouTube series about teaching concept art. And what is concept art? What is the concept art process? And some of the things I've been mentioning today were inspired by some of these talks. So definitely, Feng Zhu. I apologize if I pronounce his name.
No, I think you got it now. I was trying to see if I could find a link. Super. Well, we just have a few minutes to go till 10, but thank you, sir, for joining us. I know it's probably, well, it's not too late over there. It's getting to
No, it's 7 p.m.
evening time. Okay. Thank you to everyone that has joined in either via Twitch or through our Zoom. We appreciate everyone carving some time out during their mornings to listen to Mike. This is all super fascinating, and I think at any time we as designers and creatives can take a moment to think about what our process is internally as well as externally. It just again goes back to that cycle of you have these checkpoints and you rotate through them constantly through that whole design process. So I think this has been super enlightening and kind of a good reminder for people to remember, it's okay, go through those wonky processes of designs. You're gonna have stupid sketches, you're gonna have stuff that doesn't make sense, but it's all a part of the greater process. So thank you for that. Thank you, everyone.
Just one
Ideation
last thing.
what is
Yeah,
this?
just one
Ideation
last-
at Wacom.com. Now we're
Yeah,
giving out emails.
So if you guys have an idea, if you have your own way how you come up with a new fresh idea, what's your process? How do you motivate your brain? How do you motivate yourself? What's the trick you're using? Write me. It will reach me out.
Ideation at Wacom.com goes directly to Mike in his beautiful
Yes.
studio. So again, if you have thoughts or insights or your own workflow that you think is particularly great or whatever, send those to ideation at Wacom.com. Mike also, on top of being an amazing concept designer, works on the product team here at Wacom now. He started officially in January of this year. We're super stoked to have him. I think I literally squealed when I found out he was joining the team. Real stoked. It's always great to have creatives join in and have a voice in kind of the future of Wacom products. So that was really great. Hashtag metasketching. What's your Instagram? Are you still pretty active on Instagram?
Shame on me, but I'm trying hard. So my Instagram is a metasketcher.
That's right. You are Metasketcher. So.
Yeah. So feel free to reach me out there. I promise there will be much more content soon.
Yes.
And also there are a couple of the projects we are working together with Wacom, which I can't reveal. Something may happen quite soon. I'll keep you informed. Some of them is really fascinating in a way, in a direction of what was today's conversation or presentation. It wasn't a conversation. I would love to be a conversation, but you guys are on the other side
someday,
of the.
I promise.
Yeah.
We'll just keep washing your hands and wear your masks, everyone. Don't touch other people's faces. That's always kind of a standard warning for functioning in the public. But again, thank you everyone for joining. We will, of course, bring Mike back, I'm sure, for some other live streams, maybe to talk about your creative process, get you sketching on Twitch some more, because that's one thing that we love sharing, is just watching people sketch and how their process comes together, and all those great things. So thank you again to everyone for joining. For those of you that don't already follow us on social media, the Wacom Experience Center is on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We're pretty active on Instagram and Twitter, so I post up-to-date, events and other things that we have coming up. We do also consistently live stream on our Twitch channel, so pretty standard on Wednesdays and Fridays. This week we've got some really great, there's a new video game and I can't remember what it's called, and I'm sorry, Carter. I did post it on our Instagram story though, but we've got some cool video game inspired art, digital illustration coming up on Wednesday and Friday. So tune in, find and follow us on the Twitch and the Instagrams and the internet. And again, I thank everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you, Ghost of Tsushima. I remembered what it was. I was reminded. Thank you, everyone. We will see you guys all soon, and hopefully before 2025, we'll have Mike actually physically in Portland. So
hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you guys for joining. We will see
Thank you.
all
Bye-bye.
soon.